Councilmember Lara,
Here.
City Manager Gibbs. Here. Manager Worzinski,
Here.
Chair Rader.
Here.
Vice Chair Moran stated he would not be here this evening. He had a conflict. Member Nerschel. Member Melman.
Here.
Member Brown. Member Lawson.
Present.
Member Copeland.
Present.
Member Ron Rader.
Present.
Member Beneke.
Present.
Youth Council Member Harris. Alternate Member Vogt. All right, thank you.
Are there any actions for excused absences? Not hearing any. Please, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Reelwright, do we have any adjustments to the agenda?
No, ma'am.
Do we have any conflict of interest disclosures? Hearing none, I'll move to page 2. I cut my finger this morning, so my fingers aren't working very good, so I'm injured. Public comment period. Do we have anyone on the line or in the audience for public comment?
I have no written comments, none in the room. It doesn't look like our phone line is connected, so I need to check on that, and I will get back to you if we have
Okay,
anyone.
thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have, so we don't have any requests to speak?
Not
this
at the
time?
moment. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully you've all had time to review the minutes. Are there any adjustments or discussion to the minutes from our last meeting?
We had a meeting in April, but we didn't have a quorum, right? That's why we didn't have minutes from the April meeting? And then we didn't have a meeting in May, so.
We went ahead and did minutes anyways. They're just an informational meeting, and they're attached.
Okay, so you're looking for approval for the March minutes, right? Right, at this point? That's on the agenda? That's what you're looking for?
And the April 12th.
Yes.
And the April 12th, whoops, this is different agenda. Look. Anyway, referencing the March minutes, there were 2 appointments made to 2 positions. I was one of them, and I think Ron was the other, but the names weren't in the minutes, and I think it's appropriate to put the names
Okay.
of those appointments in the minutes, so,
I'll check on that, and I'll correct it.
okay.
If anyone wants, they can approve with the changes made, or I can bring the minutes back, whichever you'd prefer.
I would just move to approve what the changes recommended, if they're not in there. I did not notice them in there, and I think they should be in there, but.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oh, Nicole, do we need to call it?
No.
Is anyone opposed or abstaining to the minutes? Thank you. So the approval of the minutes passes. Do we have an update on projects by city staff? Mr. Worzinski?
Yes, Madam Chair. First, and I can let Nicole go over it, we don't do roll call votes anymore because of the legislation for the online thing. So unless the body wants to do the roll call, we go back to what we used to do.
Oh, okay, well, I'm old, my memory.
So that's one update. Another update, if you haven't noticed, you likely have, is that Pennsylvania widening has started. So please excuse our construction. The road will be widened from the 2 lanes to 4 to better move around traffic and customers within that area. Will be some time before it's completed, but Public Works has told us that they're looking for end of this calendar year or possibly first quarter of next year. And then Second Street extension from its current terminus behind Kohl's per se, will be extended over to Pennsylvania to intersect and provide additional traffic movement within that corridor. And that project is expected to start fairly soon, and then also finish around the same period of time. You've likely noticed when you came in today that City Hall renovation has started, so please excuse our dust at the location. We are renovating the rooms on the other side of the hallway, as well as some of the other hallway functions to create a better customer experience for residents and businesses to come meet us here more at a formal counter type of environment versus kind of what we were doing during COVID, where it was the door and so forth. So please excuse our dust for that type of project. Quickly, a quick update from the ICSC conference, which is the shopping center conference, the national one of the largest ones in the nation. We had a team of city staff that attended that, participated with a booth at Riverside County's pavilion, as well as met with countless different businesses and developers, including some of our local developers that swung by our booth and were happy to see us there as well. So we were able to tell them that we're there to support them, and also they were able to link up with us there to talk about any challenges that might be having and so forth. So that was very well attended and I believe a success. And then lastly, just a friendly reminder that the Beaumont Eats and Treats Passport to Downtown program is still ongoing, but you need to submit your completed passport by this Friday, end of business, which for us is at noon here at City Hall, in order to be eligible for the raffle for a TV or one of the various gift cards that we've purchased. The current tally, I believe, is 13 or 14 people have completed and submitted their cards. We've started, Daniel and I have started to discuss the impact that the businesses have felt from that, and we're preparing some analytics and a report to be brought back likely to this committee and to council on kind of what we think the results were beyond just how many people submitted the cards.
When the project was started, what was the anticipation?
I didn't have a good guesstimate on that one. The passport was more of a function to accomplish what staff and I think council's goal was to encourage more people to get outside their comfort zone and to try some of the local businesses within the downtown area that they may have not gone to. Historically, they may have always gone to Ramona's for Mexican food, but they had never tried Palacios or Frijoles or Señorial or Tacos and Beer. So it was designed to kind of get them, okay, I went to this place, I always go here, so I got my card. But now what are these other locales that I've never heard of that may have good food and that type of thing? So that was the goal of the program, was to encourage residents
Good.
and business owners to go to other places and to try all of them.
Thank you.
And that concludes my report. I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Councilmember White for a quick update from
I wanted to
council.
I wanted to ask a question if I could, Kyle. Do we have any new businesses coming to town that you can talk about?
I think at the last meeting, we may have announced that Boston Pizza was the one that had leased out the former Victor's restaurant in the Best Buy or the Second Street Marketplace Center. For people that are fairly new or came in after Victor's closed, it's behind the Starbucks within that corner inline space over there. So it's kind of it's a pizza place, sports bar type of thing. And then when we were at ICSC, we got confirmation that Cold Stone will be moving into the space where Flip Flop Shop previously was, next to Cookie Co. and to Nectar and so forth. There was a couple businesses that were vying for that space, and it appears that Cold Stone has won that battle and will be selling ice cream shortly.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to, just recently, there's been some big news about a major infrastructure project that I think is going to really benefit the city of Beaumont. It started with, and I'm talking about Potrero, the interchange where right now it's just an bridge across the 60. And we, about last month, I think it was, RCTC's staff committee recommended that Beaumont get $8 million towards that project. And that left us with that's assuming that we can get the other 33.5 million. And if we do, then we can start the project. That was approved today in RCTC's meeting, so it's official that we're getting the 8 million. We also found out this week or last week? Last week, Thursday, that staff had put in for a grant for 33.5 million, which is what we need. And California Transportation Commission has approved, their staff has recommended it for approval to the full commission, which is pretty much a pretty good chance it's going to go through, and that's going to get approved on June 28th. So with that, we will have all the money to be able to do phase 2 of Potrero, and that will hopefully start construction first or second quarter of next year, is what I've been told. Again, everything needs to fall in place still, and there's some updates that Caltrans has requested. So, but it will be a significant change to our traffic patterns downtown once all the trucks are getting on and off right there. So we're really excited about it, but thank you. That's what I wanted to update.
Thank you, Mr. White. Do we have any questions for either Kyle or Lloyd?
I have a question only because I go the back road. I don't want to go on the freeway. It's always crowded. But anyway, a question, when is that fire station being built over, they're going to be done? I mean, it seems like it started 10 years ago or something. I don't know. It just seems like it's been there a long time, and I'm just kind of curious.
It'll be done by December.
December.
So just over 13 months. I think we did the kickoff in November.
We did.
I know probably weather caused some of that delay because we had
We
you know,
had-
really bad winter. But,
We had 56 days of rain, so it's,
yeah, I thought maybe a change and you were going to put a fast food there or something. No, we got a fire station finally. That's good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, would we like to move on to the Downtown Revitalization Plan update and presentation?
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and introduce the city's consultant that's working on this exciting program for the revitalization plan for the downtown. So we have Jonathan Linkus from GHD, and then Linda Coglington that's working on behalf of GHD through her own company that's more of the economics background and expertise in that field. So I'll go ahead and kick it over to them, and they can introduce themselves and then go through the presentation. Thank you.
Honorable Chairwoman, thank you very much. Members of the committee. My name is Jonathan Lakis. I'm the urban planning lead.
Oh, thanks. There we go. Wow. I'm the urban planning lead with GHD, and I'm also joined on Zoom with Todd Tregenza. He's a transportation planning lead. Todd, can we hear you?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, that's perfect. Yes.
Okay, good.
And Linda?
Yeah.
I'm Linda Congleton. I have my own company, Linda's Congleton Associates. For over 35 years, I've specialized in economic feasibility, retail vitalization, and one of my niches is bringing new kinds of creative ideas that actually work, or that are doable, that are implementable to small towns.
So this is a presentation that most of the content of which was shown about a month ago to a publicly invited stakeholder meeting. And we had about 22 participants, most of which were business owners on the downtown corridor. And that involved voting and also a lot of conversation about vision and direction. So this is the whole of the team that's working on your revitalization plan. And we took a look into the context and background of this plan and the history of downtown. And we also have to remind ourselves, what is the overall vision and what is the vision that was given to us through the Chapter 11 General Plan update. And, you know, we have to remind ourselves that this is a place for small businesses and entrepreneurs. This is something really special to downtown, in particular in Beaumont. An emphasis on community, people, and pedestrians. This is really about how do we make downtown walkable, amenable to more people living on the corridor and spending more time out of cars and on foot. And also, how do we position downtown for regional events, regional competitiveness? So how do we get there, and how does this plan do that? You know, we acknowledge that there has been a lot of planning to date, and our document will sit among many others that we have reviewed, including the Economic Development Strategic Plan from 2019, which followed a series of workshops as early as 2014. Of course, the general plan update provides a robust policy framework that is part of the downtown area plan. That was just a couple of years ago. We also have a parking management master plan and a couple of visioning workshops that began to look at some implementation steps. We're of course including input from the housing element from last year, and then our document should be completed at the end of this calendar year. So we're also looking at this strategically, and Linda's helping us a lot with that.
I think he's turning it over a little bit. Well, just to give you a big picture, because you haven't been introduced to what we do, what we have done, we've done a complete inventory of all the businesses downtown. We've done a complete evaluation of all your retail competition, both regional and local. We've looked at your housing market. You have an impressive quality of new housing homes that are being offered in Beaumont. I personally walked your model homes, and they're very impressive. And I'm going to get back to that topic, because you have also extremely high incomes of these people moving in. And yet, one of the things they don't have are places to eat that are close to their homes. They don't really have a downtown, and they yearn for that kind of thing. So this has been, the other thing we have done is we've looked at, because what is really doable given the ownership of lots as they now exist. We've also done they ended up being about 14 one-on-one interviews with key property owners in the downtown area, also the retailers, including Agape, Toscano's, Cornerstone Barbecue, Craft Lounge, all these what I call these innovative entrepreneurs who've kind of made the stab of coming downtown. And I have to say that the retailers provided some of the best advice at because we asked them, what do you think is needed to make downtown more viable for your businesses? And it was extremely good set of interviews. And then we've done 2 brainstorming sessions with Jonathan, and one of the things I would like to kind of propose to you is, this idea that when you have a town like downtown, like it now exists, you kind of say to yourself, yeah, we have this huge vision of wanting to make it all happen at once. But we have found that most smaller, and when I say smaller downtowns, anything from, 8,000 homes, 15,000 homes, 20,000 homes, that's not really how it happens. It happens in smaller incremental steps that are doable, that are really doable. And many times that happens with districts. You got a little district here that people go, hey, have you been downtown Beaumont and seen that? And then you have another district and another, then the word gets out. So I think what you're going to see in some of our programming and some of our recommendations is what we're going to encourage the city to do is be behind some of these incremental steps that will happen over a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year horizon. We hope that some of them can happen even in the short term, within the next 5 years.
So taking that strategy, that strategic thinking about what kind of housing, what kind of retail, and what kind of lot sizing we need to accommodate those projects, we're estimating the carrying capacity of downtown in terms of what is most economically viable over 25 years. We're also looking at the zoning recommendations. We were just talking about that yesterday, and how they can suit the right kind of housing that's market ready or market desired right now. Of course, in partnership with Todd's transportation team, we're looking at conceptual streetscape drawings that give a little more material planometrics to ideas around how you refit the public realm for a more walkable future. We're going to provide some site plans for private developments in the private realm that are right behind the property line of public realm improvements. So it's this holistic design approach, and that includes a look at the parking. Again, I mentioned public realm a few times. We're going to prepare a sample architectural guideline that I think will be the germ, probably about 15 to 20 pages, the germ of a larger form-based document if that's desired ultimately. A sort of kit of parts signage and wayfinding program that can be used in further bid documents, and some further guidance on incentives and governance. A lot of that's going to come from Linda's side of the equation. And of course, we're going to check in on the CEQA sufficiency from the general plan, which is in most cases probably going to be adequate, but we'll look at that.
I would like to add to Jonathan's comments, when we did the interviews with property owners and businesses downtown, the number one issue that always came up that they saw as a constraint to adding more businesses was traffic. Traffic, and the speed of the inflows through the downtown area. So you're going to see a lot, this is where we think the city could be most helpful. And also, I think, and you'll see in some of our programming, is initially selecting areas that don't necessarily require you to have massive slows of traffic in the near term, like the next 2 years, 3 years.
Right, so the most important thing, I think, in the sort of scope summary here is the capital improvements, obviously. Also looking at how our drawings can support bid packages for that, and also looking at how the city can seek developers, and we're going to provide a strategy for that, and anything the city can do to help those developers attain the right size parcels. This is about a year-long process. You can see the interviews were largely completed. We're still open to talking to a few more. The workshop was a month ago, and we're about halfway through the process. So what are current conditions? Some basic notes we've made that I think are familiar to most in this room are, of course, the individual properties that are for sale separately, and they're small lots. And a lot of developers today need something a little bigger to accommodate the kind of mixed use that's a part of the area plan vision. The purposing and cleanup of our alleys as safe pedestrian spaces that also efficiently park for the uses we desire are something we should consider, and is often a part of downtown revitalizations. Making sure the area is pedestrian friendly and safe, that includes the sidewalks and the crossings. Generating awareness of downtown's existence to outsiders from the freeway with a consistent brand, and any physical infrastructure signage that we need in terms of a gateway, pylons visible from the freeway, are things we're also thinking about. And just what can we do with a lot of the asphalt that's in front of businesses? You know, those are constrained by parking requirements that are relying on their own parking supply. How can a public parking supply in the street, around the street, and in the alleys help support a little more space given over to outdoor dining, patios, and garden spaces? I won't review this in detail. This is the downtown vision statement from January of 2021. I'm just going to emphasize the pedestrian-friendly, integrated mixed of uses, and public realm or public gathering spaces mentions in that vision statement. This is a view of the downtown area plan. I think what's important to call out here are the active ground floor uses required right along 6th in the vicinity of Beaumont in California. So really seeking that mixed use, sort of active people on the sidewalks and street. Looking at the overall urban strategy, we're trying to create a downtown that's competitive with other surrounding downtowns, and we're really trying to create a space that is appropriate for some of the types that Linda is recommending are most market viable. Do you want to read through these?
Yes, I would, because one of the biggest trends that's happening, not just in your city and others, I was talking to Vaughn earlier, I've worked in about 4 or 5 small cities in the Texas region. If you talk to people, the types of restaurants they really want to go to, they don't want to go to the chain restaurants that are out there at Highland Springs. They want those unique, one-of-a-kind. You've got an unusual situation in the sense that you have had this huge introduction of very upscale new residents come to your community, and yet no place for them to go to dine. That's you've got the demand, but you don't have the place for them to go. So one of the things we're suggesting as the first thing to start is encouraging those new restaurants. But we're not talking about a national campaign to bring in those big, huge chains that are everywhere. That's not what folks really want. If they wanted that, they would have gone down to the Highland Springs area, and it's not a coincidence that most of those are not rated very well. They're not rated, most of those restaurants are not 4 and above on Yelp. And yet you've got some kernels of real creativity right here in downtown with the Cornerstone Barbecue and the Craft Lounge and others that are rated well. So, but where are they going now? They're going to Redlands. They're going to the desert. They're going way out to Temecula. They're going to Yucaipa. That shouldn't be. So first we've got to, we've identified the demand. Now we've got to provide the conditions for those individual entrepreneurs to come here. Now, when we're talking about independent restaurants, yes, we're talking about the guy who's that one entrepreneur, but there are many, many entrepreneurs that have 2 restaurants, 3 restaurants. Toscana's has multiple restaurants, but it's not known as a chain. Okay, that's the big difference. People want to think that they're going to something unique that's really part of their own hometown experience. That day of going, oh, I'm going to Olive Garden, I'm sorry, but that's gone. That's not where people want to go. So this is an opportunity, and we also think long-term, you've got a great opportunity for drawing people off the Highway 10. So you got to think long-term. I mean, this is pretty sad that you're this great tweener location between people driving from LA all the way out to the desert. Where are they going to stop? But if you had a really unique environment here in Beaumont, we think you could be that place. So I just wanted to clarify the kinds of opportunities we're looking for. Yvonne, it's the kind of food you and I like.
This is another set of recommendations. This is based on some of the input we're getting from our interviews. Do you want to read these as well?
So we had a lot of discussions about physical improvements. And over again, we heard, yes, we want to slow the traffic down. When we brought up the topic of roundabouts, sometimes people think of those, big, huge cities like, thinking about roundabouts. And I said, no, think about some Yucaipa. Look how Yucaipa functions very well with those roundabouts. We're talking about, slowing it down so you really have that atmosphere of a small town. And then they go, oh yeah, that would be great. Over and over again, we got some really creative ideas. Enhancing the alleys, putting wayfinding. They wanted better signage. They wanted to know where parking areas were. They wanted, because they said it's dangerous right now for people crossing one side of 6 to the other side of 6. They want to see more light. They want walking pathways that are lit, with a lot of lighting so people feel safe. Your downtown is not unsafe, but it's a perception. We've got to make that perception very friendly. They also suggested, maybe there's ability for the city to buy up a few parcels to kind of kickstart things and get things going. The other thing there were some surprising good ideas that also came up. There were some independent private property owners who wanted to own their own building, including restaurants, but they wanted the ability to put small studio units, apartments upstairs. And they said, there really isn't a great place for young people in this city to get started. And I thought to myself, now this is creative. They meant really small, 500, 600 square foot little studio apartments where, young people just starting out, they're going into college. We're not talking big, huge 300 unit apartment complexes. We're talking about these private people. They want to do some creative things upstairs. And I thought, now that's a really good idea. So the other thing I'd like to encourage you to think about, and you may not have in the past, you've got all of that area down towards Fifth Street, which has a lot of older auto uses. It's right now it's zoned more as an industrial area, and yet you can see some homes. I'm not sure how, I'm not the zoning expert, but that are scattered in that area. There's kind of a rule in retail. It goes like this: retail follows housing. Retail follows housing. So the more you can encourage in-town people to live close to downtown, the better off your retail will be long-term. And there's some areas down there in Fifth Street that would be quite attractive for what I call small lot, single-family detached. Doesn't matter if they're built for rent or for own, But you would have a real pride of ownership instead of seeing some of these quite unattractive industrial uses down there. And by the way, when I talk to property owners about that idea, talk to several of them, this says, yes, but I can't do that right now. And I said, well, would you be interested if you could? Oh, yeah, I'd like that. And they got it in their head. Remember those little 800 square foot houses? Some of us are a little older that were built in the 50s and they were starter homes for people. Why not? Why can't we provide that kind of thing here in Beaumont? Right now, people are more thinking, oh, go to those master plan communities. But if they had the option here close in town where they could walk and maybe go do some amenities, I think that's a real viable option for you.
So the update to the zoning code will do a lot to improve that, but we want to make sure the parameters of that zoning code, the density, DU per acre, some of the parking requirements suit the kind of small lot, single family, compact housing, and ground floor types that she's seeing are market relevant. And so we've been workshopping these types into a map of the city, and we're looking at different zones or areas, I should say, where there's clusters of opportunity, and we're getting site-specific on our drawing boards. And we're thinking about, is there something up around 8th and Beaumont Avenue, thinking about 6th Street with an overall infill strategy, what building types need certain parcel sizes along that route. In the Gateway, 6th, 5th, and California, is there something we can do to the streetscape to create a welcoming public realm and also suit a lot of creative restaurant uses that might nestle into some of the underutilized buildings in that corner? Is there opportunity for more housing on vacant sites now? And what do those landowners think is appropriate for them? And of course, also the town center, the civic center, how can that really link together and create a holistic opportunity that might also spur the economy a little more? This is just a glimpse of some of the programmatic ideas we've had without getting specific. We need to vet some of these ideas with some of those property owners and follow-up interviews, as well as check in with the economic development team, before us. But, we're looking at 2 restaurants, 10 to 20 townhomes in some parts of the north part of downtown. Around the Civic Center, we see an opportunity for, maybe 4 or 6 small food, beverage, or retail opportunities that can sort of couple up with some of the public plaza concept that we've seen from the city and also will introduce with this plan. The whole of 6th Street is an opportunity for infill with housing and mixed use, which is desired by the general plan, and it's written into that code. 40 to 50 smaller apartment or studio units, and we see an opportunity for about 4, maybe 5 or 6 retail shops. Those could be restaurants in the ground floor of smaller mixed-use projects. The Gateway area, there's an opportunity I think we're all aware of for 2 to 3 cafes that could inhabit some of the historic buildings there, as well as ways we can use Grace Avenue smartly to create an outdoor dining area that has more public parking that everyone benefits from. And of course, looking at opportunities for compact single family throughout the study area, already we've mapped out without changing any land use or demolishing a single building, we're fitting about 18 to 20 homes off the bat that could meet the sort of housing crisis demand today. And looking at the detail, the kind of comprehensive layout, we have to think of all of these different elements and how they work together, not just as separate topics, public and private realm, but how do these things create a whole experience for visitors and put ourselves on the ground level to see what do they want to see in their perspective view. In the service of that, we asked the stakeholders at our meeting about a month ago, what are the priorities in the public realm and the development sphere that are most important to you? All of these ideas were good, but what's most important? What should we emphasize and spend the most energy on? And all of that's voting is before you in these boards on the right side of the room here. But there was a consensus around off-street public spaces that had shade, patios, dining areas, street front that's behind the curb. A desire for that street side dining experience was also emphasized, and something that, of course, is suitable for nightlife activity. Restaurants and bars were mentioned. What was interesting is that daytime activity was a little less emphasized, and reducing parking for the sake of more trees or more public realm was also less emphasized. But so there's a general concern for parking adequacy, but I think a lot of emphasis is on what is the design of off-street public spaces. I think another thing to emphasize further down the list is looking for an opportunity for monthly or seasonal street closures for a street fair. And as we might remember, the general plan has a street section right now that supports that. But we wanted to check in on how high is that priority in the minds of the stakeholders. And I think it's also important to look at a lot of examples of these urban elements in success stories. First, we should check in and ensure that this plan is going to have a plan for street trees on both Beaumont Avenue and 6th Street. And we're going to ensure there's adequate public parking. We're going to do a parking count that implements the parking management plan. We're going to provide some basic guidelines for attractiveness and facade improvement that supports the facade improvement program, safer pedestrian crossings and wayfinding that help pedestrians. We're going to be looking for the shape, the height and girth and description of outdoor dining areas that might be something private developers can build, and we're going to make sure the architectural guideline suits those proposals. We're also looking at, of course, what are the parcels that are good for these kinds of developments, and also, of course, scaling the size of street closures for small events. And so all of this requires a thinking about our neighbors that are doing this already. Up in Yucaipa, facade improvements and street trees were found along new parallel park. No, this is a head and back end parking. We might consider a different orientation. But there's also opportunities for larger shade and seating areas among parking. This is another small rural town, Bishop, California, where you have outdoor dining behind the property line tucked into the building. Little moves like this can put a lot of activity and love on the street. You can also do that as a use agreement in the public realm, dining out in front of a building. We're familiar with a lot of these great places, but we just have to choose what's suitable for our downtown. I really encourage the activation of the alleys, and it's just a matter of degree. This is the ESCO alley program, Escondido, where they have a temporary installation. They just cleaned up the alley, sandblasted the brick, and they hang up temporary art for, I think, a week or maybe a month at most, and offer an art walk. Something that's a little more permanent, allowing a mural program to sort of clean up our rear facades, organize the parking, repaving, organize the location of trash enclosures, and some guidelines around rear patios. Of course, the highest level of commitment is completely handing over an alley to a pedestrian use, which may or may not be possible in Beaumont, but we are having to sort of ask the stakeholders if that's suitable to them. Pedestrian streets, just a couple of examples that are fun. Parking or parklets that are temporary can do a world of good, as well as more serious commitments of streets to pedestrian use. These are all success stories. It's also important to think really critically about public parking and the identification of public parking adequacy, as well as a change to the parking rules and possibly even eliminating parking minimums may open up opportunities to do something like this in the asphalt that's in front of a business. These are the places that get people out and enjoying a business, not just stopping by and spending a bit, but repeatedly returning. Public shade, as we saw, that was a priority among the stakeholders that voted. This is an important one, the Market Street, and I bring this up because this is a street section that's actually on your books right now in the general plan. And so what we've been doing at this early stage is zooming out, not asking about specifics yet, but just asking the community, does this idea that's on the books now still make sense to you? Are you aware of it? And does it suit the kind of event hosting that you want in front of your businesses? So this is the example from Lancaster Boulevard, nearby in the desert. And this is what happens on a weekly basis, the sort of market stall use that pedestrianizes the public realm. It's a serious commitment that is, I think, a competitive advantage when you do build it, but it also requires that we all agree that this is the right kind of brand for our downtown. And of course, a lot of things that are in the public realm, like gateways, landscape, and of course, urban catalysts like our neighbor up in Yucaipa that built the Performing Arts Center. These are all things that are relevant on 6th Street and the Civic Center. So we asked our stakeholders the degree of change that they wanted to think about as an overall strategy. What is taking the temperature of their position on 6th Street in Beaumont? What happens behind their businesses in alleys and parking areas? And also just what kind of degree of development do you want to see the city leaning in on and encouraging? And our votes were surprising to us, actually. There was a lot of support for a dramatic transformation on 6th Street or Beaumont Avenue for the sake of hosting events. We called it the sort of total transformation on the right side of that board. Everyone voted for a really slow speed on 6th or Beaumont. A lot of change to the curbs and parking strategy, and really just focusing on the benefit of pedestrians in downtown. A lot of support, again, on that right side for alleys and parking areas that are suitable to pedestrians. So we're getting permission to design significant changes that advance these causes. A little more hesitancy for dramatic change in the development sphere. So there is not as much interest for a forward-leaning program of lot merging. I think it's still appropriate to identify some opportunities, 2 or 3, throughout downtown, but this is really about how can you work with existing businesses to change their use of their property rather than wholesale replacement of downtown structure. And then we're looking at the public realm strategy with street specifics. So this was an overall sort of what is the chess game or the chess strategy for downtown? Do you want to emphasize 6th Street or Beaumont Avenue or focus on the alleys? And in this example, we were saying, look, if you don't transform 6th Street for pedestrians outside of a typical road diet, you're going to need to create a pedestrian realm in the alleys. Is that what people want? And this is a brief example of that. And about 32% of the room supported beautification and dining support that might be in the alleys, but there was also a little less emphasis of this idea overall, and its support for infill development. So the message here is that we want to ensure active streets and beautification are a part of any plan we make, but there was a lot more support for the most aggressive strategy. This was one for Beaumont Avenue, a little less interest in transforming Beaumont Avenue for a pedestrian sort of event convertible use. Some interest, 27% of the room also liked the idea of mid-scale housing that might be following that level of commitment. The idea here is that the level of change you make to Beaumont or 6th is concomitant with the amount of redevelopment that might follow. So if you really fundamentally transform 6th Street and connect that to a civic center that also has a more pedestrian inviting realm with retail infill in both of those spaces, you're going to support more redevelopment and you're going to invite that. So the room was really supportive of that dramatic change, major mixed use opportunities that would be appropriate along a highly pedestrianized 6th Street and really committing 6th Street as a major event district. For weekly or monthly closures. Third of the room was voting in that way. I invite Todd to talk a little bit about some of our transportation improvements. Todd, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the votes for street improvements.
Great. So we presented a number of different options for street improvements, and they, similar to what Jonathan just discussed, they kind of range from minimal change all the way to a wholesale reinvention, and you're going to see some similar concepts here. But starting with this one, we started with the idea of going from a 4-lane road to a 1-lane per direction road with a center turn lane, what's referred to commonly sometimes as a road diet or a roadway reconfiguration. You go from 4 lanes, 2 per direction, to 3. And what that gains, and you have that in a lot of areas near the study area already. And so you're building off of concepts that already have been shown to work in your town. And that gets you angled parking on both sides of the street. So that prioritizes, obviously, the number of parking stalls that you have. Another option is to stick to parallel parking. And so you're going to get fewer stalls on the street, but you gain a tremendous amount of right of way. And in this example, we put that all into the pedestrian space. So wider sidewalks with more landscaping, things like transit shelters are possible, eating areas in front of restaurants, a number of different amenities, benches, trash cans, things like that. So really giving that back to the pedestrian area and the business frontages. Another option was to, again, stick with the parallel parking, which gives you more space beyond the curb. But instead of putting it all to pedestrian use, adding in some really high quality, robust bikeways. And these are shown here as protected bike lanes, class 4 bike lanes. These are shown at grade with the sidewalk, which is nice. It gives you kind of a flush surface between where people exit their cars and the business frontages, but there's a number of different varieties you could look at in terms of how that's actually designed. And then the last one is kind of the full reinvention, I suppose, on the spectrum of change. And that's where we go with the center angled parking area. And we recognize that even though it's used for parking during typical days, it is a flexible space that is turned back over into a public event space, maybe once a month or more frequently or less frequently, but it's an area where you can host and gather outside and turn it into an event area. This would be a much slower street, and so it doesn't have full bike lanes. It's a street where cyclists and pedestrians would feel comfortable walking around because it would be designed to accommodate speeds lower than 20 miles an hour. And we also got the highest number of votes for that option in this case. So from a transportation perspective, that cross-section was selected. We got the lowest amount of response for a bicycle-first street. And that may be reflective of maybe just the priority of the community to make it a main street that's walkable, and maybe a lack of a strong bicycle community presence at the moment. So interesting results here for us, and kind of in line with the results Jonathan shared.
And this, again, supports the general plan we have, but we thought it was important to ask the stakeholders again to ensure they're aware of it and that we can continue with that design. It's also important to note that the sum of votes for a more traditional streetscape do not exceed the interest among those stakeholders in that center parking public supply that is event-oriented.
A couple more things we asked the community. One was to vote their these aren't really choices. These are more gauging support for different concepts. Support for raised crosswalks as a treatment, support for curb extensions, or what some people may know as bulb outs. Bulb outs got a good amount of support. I think those are more familiar. The raised crosswalks maybe could benefit from a little bit more public communication about their benefits. The purpose of that in the downtown corridor would be to slow vehicles down in between intersections, especially if we're going to be moving forward with a concept such as the one with the diagonal parking in the center. It'll be really important to have engineered speed control measures. And so curb extensions, raised crosswalks, things of that nature will need to be considered to make sure that people entering the corridors of Beaumont and 6th Street and then people on them themselves are traveling at an appropriate speed. And that brings me to the last speed control measure, which is also a beautification opportunity, but we got 14 votes in support of roundabouts. And so I didn't see any votes against roundabouts. So people were generally in favor of them. I think there were some concerns about whether they would fit or how certain vehicles would operate through them. These are all issues that we talked about with the community and issues we can talk about tonight. But in having conversations, most people were familiar with them and saw how they could be used to really help generate the Main Street feel and safe environment that we're looking for.
Okay.
Yes,
No,
Linda?
it's Todd.
Yep.
Before I end my part of it, I'd like to propose a way to get from here to there. Many of you, many cities like to say, oh, I'd like to blink my eyes and like magic, it's done in, you got 10 blocks done. It's not going to happen that way here. And I'll tell you why. You got too much fragmented small ownership. But that's okay, because if you look at many, many cities across the nation, how did they redevelop? How did they really become a great city? It became great by having districts. It started with these small districts. He calls it the Gateway District, I call it the Warehouse District. I will tell you from my interviews, I was quite surprised. There is great interest in the private sector on doing something in that warehouse area. You all know it is, around the Ramona's restaurant and where the Grace Building is and all that. That could be one of your best near-term opportunities. Then I move to the next district, and I call it kind of the City Hall. I gave it a different name than he did. I called it, maybe there could be a restaurant row. Then we've got to the north, all that area there, and maybe that could be the Arbor District, because you've got some beautiful specimen trees up there. It's okay not to have it continuous, because we all say, I was a consultant to the city of Pasadena and to the very first large project in downtown Pasadena, and I can unequivocally say it did not happen overnight. For any of those who know Pasadena, it took 25 years to happen. In fact, I had city people say to me, Linda, we're afraid those parking structures aren't going to be financeable. And not every city should have even parking structures. Okay, so my point to you is, it's fine to say, let's start with this district, and this district, and do it in phases, because it's all grand. Yes, you need these improvements, but I'm working now with a city that they did absolutely 100% everything. Those Main Street America books that tell you everything you're supposed to do with the murals and the signage and the street furniture, absolutely everything. And they're still having problems. And you say, why? Well, unlike you, they have, within 5 minutes outside of their downtown, they have enormous competition of superb food. You, on the other hand, have 15,000 homes with not a lot of competition. You're going to drive 20 minutes or a half hour or 40 minutes. So you've got the people, right? Now, yes, you need to provide more homes. So, yes, you need to do the improvements, but at the same time, you've got to work as a city to do those RFPs, solicit interest from the private sector development, and bring in those uses that people want to use. It's wonderful to have street improvements, but at the same time, let's phase in those great, economic uses.
So again, this was just a visioning conversation, taking their temperature, the degree of change. And I think that the next step is to take that level of permission to design some of these sub-districts. Little block-sized areas, drawing new buildings, drawing the landscapes around them, showing that to some of the landowners themselves, getting them inspired about their own assets and interest, and then also drawing the streetscape and plan. We've got the section in the general plan right now. We've confirmed that with a segment of stakeholders. We're going to draw that in plan and see how it really pencils out in terms of one end to the other. And then we're going to probably finish that effort around September and show that to you and the public at that point. And with their approval of those as kind of consensus concepts, we're going to focus October, November, really autumn, in how are they implemented? What is the order of operations taken for each of those districts by the city and your committee? And how are public funds also in the CIP scheduled or should be timed to support those developments? And that final plan will then be reviewed at the end of the calendar year, and hopefully December, early next year, this is adopted. So thank you, and we're here for any questions.
That was marvelous. Thank you so much. It's so exciting to see the plan, and I understand it's going to take a long time, but you can see the vision that you have. It's wonderful. Does anyone have questions?
I have a question. You mentioned about, you've worked with companies and businesses that specifically work with cities, small cities, in recruitment. What has been your success with those companies? I mean, you know, is there success based on kind of what we develop here and get implemented and get moving? Or do they come in and kind of have a way of doing it? I'm new to that kind of
No.
business.
Let me just give you a framework of the strategy. Well, yes, I've worked for big restaurant companies. For 7 years, I worked for BJ's Restaurant and Brew House when they were first formulating that kind of thing. That's, okay, what I suggest to you as a city is you go out for an RFP. Let's say you've got a sizable enough site that they can work on. And you also own some buildings, a building of your own. You go out for an RFP, you look for a private sector developer who will essentially satisfy your vision. They are the ones who have the brokerage staff, the retention, and you say to them, here's our vision. We're not looking for the chain restaurants, we're looking for the independent. Well, that development company, they're the ones who have the in-house staff. They're the ones who lease it. Now, you may want to consider a ground lease with this company. You may want to retain ownership of the land and maybe at some later point sell the land to a private sector. But you as a city have that option of doing that. I have a city client, that's exactly what they did. They had city-owned land. They,
That's this image right here, I think.
Oh,
Yep.
sorry. Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
this is the site. They leased it to individual restaurants. They got it all up and operating, and then they took the entire site and sold it to an independent, a developer who will own it and manage it and make sure the restaurants are doing the right thing. And if one goes out, they add another one. But it started on city-owned land. So, but the key thing is you don't want to be in the business of doing that, but you want to bring in the private developer that specializes in that.
Correct. And I've been involved in downtown for many years, ever since I moved here in '06, it seems. It's a long time. And, a lot of good ideas come up and general plans come and go. And
Right.
But one thing I heard that makes sense that I haven't heard all these years is this cluster concept. I've always heard, everybody wants everybody like say, we want to blink and it's done, we got two blocks of nice restaurants and nice trees and awnings there and but that's not realistic.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And in most downtowns, if you really look over the long-term history, unless they had absolutely vacant land, they were a big master plan community with nothing on it, it doesn't happen that way. Even in the best downtowns, if any of you know downtown Dallas, it didn't start that way. There was an area that was for the nightclubs. There was the financial district. There was this district. I mean, in 1984, I was working in downtown Dallas, and there were definitive districts. So why can't we do that here? Okay? And also, you're not dealing with a blank slate. You've got to work with what you've got. Okay? And there is strong interest by the private sector community in what I'm calling, he likes it, the Gateway Warehouse District right now. Okay, that's something we can do quicker than maybe some of the others. But at the same time, let's get all the districts going.
What would you suggest with regards to the auto repair shops and the axle, whatever? I mean, I thought a lot about that, and really, if you want to develop that into what you call a restaurant kind of area, you're going to have to do something with those businesses. And I often thought it might behoove the city to think about some auto center where they could be relocated. They're great businesses. They do a great business. They do a great job.
And they employ a lot of people in
Yeah.
downtown
And they
as well.
employ a lot of people. So did you were they at this meeting? I mean, did you talk to anybody with that group?
And I understand, but you have auto businesses south of Fifth. You also have them on Sixth. You have them scattered around. And yet at the same time, I've talked to a few of them. One has some empty property and he also has an auto business, and he originally was gonna expand it, now he's not expanding, and he'd like to do something with the empty land. I would contend to you that if you, particularly down in the Fifth Street area, if you allowed housing to be developed, which is such a higher use, that some of those auto uses, the guys get older, they don't wanna be in the business anymore, they've got kids that don't wanna be it, they would naturally go bye-bye on their own.
Yeah, the interviews have revealed a kind of case-by-case experience with some of those landowners where they've been comfortable for a long time. The zoning and the market may not have suited them for any kind of change, but now when they're hearing about a downtown plan, the zoning change and an interest in the city doing what it can to support, then the story changes a little bit. So it has to be case-by-case, has to be parcel by parcel. That's the other reason we're sort of working in small little clusters of parcels rather than, drawing something the length of Sixth Street.
One of my, forgive me, but one of my pet peeves is seeing these, not him, because I like this guy here, is seeing these big architectural firms that come in and they give these gorgeous photos of, this is what you're, and they take 5 blocks and they transform it magically. And I go, okay, how do you expect to get from A to Z? They have no plan, right? No. Well, at the end of this, we're going to give you a program that's doable, workable, and that you can really sink your teeth into.
One of the concerns that I have when you talk about trying to, and I know it's important to slow the traffic down on Sixth Street, but anytime that there's an accident or traffic stoppage on the I-10, Sixth Street becomes the pass-through. And we tried to do a type of road diet and got nothing but complaints. So are you gonna have a traffic study done so that whatever we propose is gonna be something that will still be able to handle the volume? As well as slow traffic down, or is that an oxymoron? You can't do both.
You can almost do both. The question, first of all, we have to ask ourselves is there a role for downtown that predicates changes to other parts of the city? And I mention that because the Potrero interchange allows a lot of the bypass traffic to not have to take the 5th Street, Grace Avenue kind of corner of downtown to get back onto the freeway. Also, some of the throughput in roundabouts and even a road diet condition can be similar to the 4-lane configuration. This is something that Todd does a lot in small towns in Northern California. Todd, can you also speak to this?
Yeah, I think the you will certainly get fewer vehicles going through Beaumont per hour per lane with 1 lane per direction than you would with 2. I mean, there's no doubt. But I don't know that that's what we want to design for. And so if we want to design for business use and resident use and the people that want to spend time there, I think the 3-lane section with the center turn lane can be advantageous over a condition where you don't have a turn lane, for example, which can occur with 4 lanes, right? And then you're blocking 1 lane. Roundabouts do provide a more consistent and steady stream of vehicles. So a 1 lane per direction road with roundabout intersections does serve quite a bit more traffic than if it were to have stop signs or traffic signals. Usually it adds about 33 to 50% capacity over a traffic signal configuration because it keeps the vehicles moving at a steady, slow pace. I think one of the main drivers of the traffic in Beaumont when it does get congested is people that are just going through it, that they don't really they have no intention of spending time or money there. They're there because they have to be, because it's the shortest route, or because they're trying to find a bypass around some other blockage. And I think there are some regional projects under development, like the Potrero Road interchange, which is great news to hear, that are going to help at least get some of that warehouse commuter traffic out of the downtown. There's a lot of northbound left turns. let's see. Those are the main points I think I wanted to hit at. We reviewed your daily volume, the typical condition, and that's well within a roundabout 3-lane road corridor kind of service capacity. It's very similar, in fact, to the traffic volumes that were up in the Yucaipa area prior to the roundabout construction. I went back and looked at that environmental document. It's very similar to what we see on Beaumont and 6th. So I do think it's viable as an alternative.
That's also why we refer to the general plan and the drawing that's on the books now, and why we ask these kind of broad visioning questions in a stakeholder meeting, because it's ultimately a policy choice we have to make. As Linda and Todd have put it, what do we design for? So there may be more complaints about traffic increases during those 10 disasters. I mean, we've seen it. It's a stack of cars, but at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, do we want our downtown to be the place where people do try to bypass the 10? Is there another place in Beaumont where some of that traffic may choose to go? And is that the cost of offering a pedestrian sort of heart to the city? So it ultimately is a policy choice and less a technical choice, because we know there will be a traffic constraint, but at the advantage of pedestrians and the people who live in Beaumont and are moving centripetally sort of to the center rather than going to Temecula for their dining in their evenings.
I think there's another way to look at it too. If you look at it as phased, if you have these 3 major districts, and you have some alleyways that are really enhanced, and that the 3 major districts are not facing 6 in the early days, right? And so as the 3 districts are maturing, now you get to be known for people. People know where you're going, what is there, and that you become a desirable place. Then the areas along 6th Street itself become much more enhanced. Then, because it's going to take some time to get those roundabouts in and slow down the traffic, but that is not a prevention, or it shouldn't slow you down on these 3 central districts. So if everything's going on, let's say, kind of vision, I've got these 3 districts going, and meanwhile, over 10 years, I'm slowing down the traffic, therefore 6th Street becomes more desirable in Beaumont, because then you hit year 10, 12, or 15, you go, whoa, now we have something. But at the same time, you're not sitting still. Do you see where I'm going? And most of the activation is on the side streets until the traffic is slowed with these physical improvements.
Yeah, prior to the implementation of a 6th Street in the form of a section that's on the books now with that center median parking, there's also places we're identifying where you could have street closures. I mean, we're looking at Orange in the heart of the Civic Center as a place where you could close the street just for an evening or on a weekend, and there's the plans for the new City Plaza, and there's the public parking right there, which in the long term could be something that is an economic catalyst. It's land the city owns. All of that creates a little town center that could host its own events and closures, and the sort of market positioning of that can then be explored as something you would then put on 6th Street. And that could happen, 8, 10 years from now, rather than saying, we're going to commit to it now, that change is coming in 3 years. And a lot of that requires other things to happen. Potrero has to be completed. The police station, we understand, is looking for a new home that suits their capacity and their needs. That also would be a part of that. So the other moves outside, you had mentioned an auto center. That's something we'd thought about, but that might depend on the city's readiness to purchase land and provide that parcel base for a developer. They have to, you have to invite and seek through a bid process. So that's a good idea too. It's just where do we set the dial in terms of the policy and the level of commitment from the city to make that happen?
And I'd like to leave with this kind of big idea, is little wins equal more wins, right? You got to have little successes, and then you get on to bigger successes and more successes. Right now, and I'm not trying to be cruel or anything, but you don't have anything to wave your flag about yet. You know, you can't jump up and down. You could go into all the conventions you want, but you don't have the bragging rights yet. So let's focus on something that's really doable today in the next 5 years. Meanwhile, work on the infrastructure. And then my hope is in 10 or 12 years, if I were to come back and have a meeting with you guys, you go, God, thank God we started with those little wins. I quoted him.
Any other questions?
You don't, you don't get into any financing type deals? I mean, you don't, you know, a lot of this takes money, and I've known other cities that I've been aware of that have created downtown districts, finance districts. You call them what you may, but they're basically districts that self-impose a tax to do certain infrastructure development, things of that nature.
And also, many of them were done when there were very viable redevelopment agencies, which we don't have now.
That's true, and actually, it's kind of forced cities to come up with creative, I'll call it creative solutions to some of these financing problems. But you don't really get into any of that. I mean, that's.
I think we can, I mean, his firm has some ideas on grant programs. Where I can be helpful to you is how do you structure, from a city standpoint, structure the deals to going out for RFPs that will be desirable to the private sector. How do you structure them so the private sector goes, like I says, hey, I want that. In spite of the fact I have about a really large number of city clients, I would still say 80% of my work is on the private side. So I know what they're looking for. You know, unlike being a consultant that is strictly a city consultant, I know what those guys want to see, the kind of deals they want to see, and the kind of things that excite them. So that's where I can provide the most use for you.
Yeah, our scope provides for, or in our scope, we will provide an order of operations, probably for each of the areas we're showing here. That's kind of the grouping we're thinking now. I don't think we're scoped to do pro formas or order of magnitude costing. We may be able to do order of magnitude costing for the entirety of the street, but those are huge ranges predicated on a decade of inflation. So, but yeah, the order of operations and like who owns what first might be a kind of honey-do list that we're going to make for each of these sub areas.
Thank you.
Good questions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was a great presentation. I think we can move on now to our member reports. Can we start with Steve Millman? No report? Mr. Benege, do you have a report?
I just kind of heard, I haven't validated it yet, but in terms of the Epson Golf Tournament that we have here in Beaumont every year, the LPGA's equivalent of the Corn Ferry Tour, I've heard that it's gonna be extended for another 2 years, so it'll make the 8th and 9th year that this tournament has been in the city of Beaumont. It's a great tournament. We're still trying to figure out a way to bring more people to it because it's free to the community, and every year we get more and more people coming to it. But it's kind of exciting. So that's kind of some breaking news on that front. So.
Thank you.
I already gave my report.
Christina?
I don't think I have anything at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rader?
I have nothing, Madam Chair, at this time. Thank you.
He doesn't call me that at home. The only thing I have right now, July 14th is the next Good Morning Beaumont breakfast. We have been selling out lately. The last 4 months, we've had over 100 people. Yay. So get your reservations in early. Mr. Copeland?
No comments.
Mr. Vaughn?
No major announcements. Mount San Jacinto just finished a fantastic first semester with 4,500 graduates. A lot of proud, and we have jobs for them, people, school, and absolutely.
Councilman Laura?
Nothing to report this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything else, Kyle?
None for me, thank you.
And Mr. Harris out there in the audience, do you have anything to say? Well, thank you for being here. We're glad the schools are represented, and I hope to see you back again.
You know, there is something that I did want to mention. Someone stuck my memory on it is, when you talked about your events, concerts in the park start June 28th. So I think it's every other week, starting June 28th.
We have June 28th. June 28th is the first concert in the park, then we have the July 4th celebration, and then the concerts will resume, I think, the following week after that. There we go. We have the,
Okay.
right.
So June 28th, and then 4th of July, July 12th, and July 19th are the concerts in the park.
We'll also be doing government in the park, since we're talking about being out in the community. The fourth Saturday morning of June, July, August, and September. So the city staff will be out in the parks from 9 to 11. There'll be activities for the kids, but just an opportunity for people within the community to come out and get questions answered by staff from various departments, because we understand not everybody can make it into City Hall to talk to us during the work week. So a time for people to bring their families out, bring their kids out. Rec staff will occupy the kids and give them things to do while adults are talking to staff. Any questions you might have about trash service, building permits, planning, streets, anything like that, we will all be represented.
Thank you. The next topic for our agenda is topics for future agendas. Currently, it has introduction to new business program and the RCTC passenger rail project. Are there any other items you would like to see for the future? Hearing none, I will adjourn this meeting at 5:17. I get to hit my gavel.